Okay, I believe we are online and good to go. Let me just adjust this a little bit to make sure I've got both of us in shot. Would you say that's about right?
Hi everyone.
Yeah. Okay, hi everybody. Hello from Hong Kong University, which is where we are right now. It is 7 o'clock here, and I don't know what time it is wherever you are. Yeah, my name is Rich Portman, if you've not checked out TDLive before. And yeah, I've got Ben Moorhouse with me here this evening. Could you introduce yourself for us, please,
Yeah,
Ben?
sure. Well, I'm a lecturer at the University of Hong Kong. I've been teaching here for like the last 3 years, and I mainly teach on the pre-service teacher education courses. So things like teaching literacy, English language education, teaching grammar, teaching vocabulary, these kinds of courses. I also teach the PGDE program. So those are in-service teachers who come in and want to gain more professional knowledge in the practice. Before that, I was actually a primary school teacher for like 7 years in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So I had frontline experience as well doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you work elsewhere before Hong Kong?
Not as a teacher.
Right. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
My first teaching experience was in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great. And how long have you been at the university in your current role?
I've been here. This is my halfway through my third year.
Yeah.
So 2.5 years in.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So we are going to be discussing mainly teacher reflection today, as that was the theme of December's e-bulletin. So we're going to kind of tie it in with that a little bit. So I've got a few questions for Ben. If anybody's watching and wants to throw a question our way, you can, I think, just type it just underneath the video there. Yeah, so I'm going to start off with something nice and broad to kick us off. So yeah, what would you say is the best way to sort of to self-reflect on my teaching practice? Or
Well, I think the first thing to consider is that there's no such thing as the perfect lesson. There's no such thing as the perfect teacher. So I think we have to start off with that, knowing that we're all, no matter how much experience we've got, no matter how many times we've taught that same lesson, it may not go the way we think it's going to go. And we'll always find ways to improve everything we do. So I think if we start off with that kind of mindset, it helps.
Yeah.
And then I think reflection is kind of an ongoing thing. I think we should obviously be reflecting while we're teaching and seeing how things are going. And then immediately after the lesson, it's good to kind of reflect. But then it's also good to kind of come back to that lesson later on and reflect again. So you're not just thinking, oh my goodness, that was a disaster, all these things went wrong, and then just leaving it at that, but actually kind of going for a run, going for dinner, and then going back to that lesson again and looking at it freshly.
Yeah.
I think that can really help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's one thing that I think when a lot of teachers are under the most pressure in classes is when they're being observed, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I always feel like that's such a shame because, you know, as you say, any class can go so wrong because the students, it's by nature unpredictable.
Yeah. Well, the number of variables.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing people don't understand about teaching if they're not in the profession, is that the number of variables that are there. You know, what time of day it is, what the lessons the students have had before that lesson, like whether they've been exposed to the kind of the story that you're telling now, or something else that you've done now. It may be really new to them, and they'll be really excited. It could be something they've read before and something they're totally disengaged. So all these things can impact on like the success of a lesson. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny you say about the time of day because I hadn't noticed that until I started my most recent job. I work at a primary school in Hong Kong, and yeah, I have a class of students that I see twice a week.
Yeah.
One class is second class of the day, still in the morning, and they're always so up for it and so ready to go.
Yeah.
The other one is when they've just had their lunch, and yeah, there's some definite lethargy going on in the room, and it's just like, oh.
And we have to reflect on that and then think about how we kind of plan different lessons for those kind of different times of the day, right? And think about that. I think, oh, they've just had that lunch, they're going to be digesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to do something else. Maybe I don't get them to do this, or I don't get them to do that, or do this instead, you know. So, yeah.
Okay, so you sort of said that reflection, I guess, to start off with, nobody's perfect sort of thing, which I think is a good base. But and also that it is very much an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
It's not something that should ever cease, I guess. Yeah. So sort of when would you reflect on practice and exactly like what sort of things would you be looking for when you're reflectively thinking?
Yeah, so when I guess go back to that, like immediately after, and then delayed reflection. And then what I think it's good to reflect on. Well, obviously there's lots of things going on, so it's good to reflect on those different ones: student motivation, students engagement, kind of your task design, kind of why didn't go that well? Maybe is it the type of support the students need or the demands? Maybe had you not anticipated that maybe the interactional demands of the task, so that you set up everything else, but then the students couldn't work in a group because you hadn't considered that, or they didn't have the language they needed to work in a group. So you may kind of reflecting on those things. I think you then it can also be good to actually then, when you're doing that reflecting, kind of start to think about what you do differently next time, and then almost have a focus based on that to see if that really does have impact on the next lesson. So if you think, oh, I hadn't set up for them for the interactional demands of that task, how will I do that? And then try and implement that next time. And that becomes your focus for your kind of reflections next time. So you kind of primarily focus on that specific element of the lesson.
Okay. I think for me at the moment, I'm going through quite an interesting phase with sort of my sort of reflection development, because I think before I've always thought very much about the class and what I'm doing in the class, and I guess the sort of the micro stuff in a sense, like me in my classroom. Whereas at the moment, I feel like my reflection is taking on a little bit more of a larger scale, in the sense that I'm starting to actually really question, well, hold on, with these learners, is that approach even the best way at all? Like a lot of my students, their proficiency is pretty low, so there's a lot of sort of communicative tasks that just don't really seem to take off. So I guess I'm sort of well, how students said to can it be and things like that, and trying to be like kind of, I guess, bridge things together and come up with like a happy medium of kind of approaches and stuff, rather than just be like very much CLT. CLT all the way, which kind of worked okay for me in the past, but it's not working out so well right now.
Well, I think that shows you're very reflective already. The fact you're thinking of these kind of bigger pictures, aren't you? And it's not just like the nitty-gritty of the classroom, but looking broadly at approaches, but also looking at our role as well, and things like this, like maybe what kind of role can you take up in that classroom, or what kind of role can your students take up in that classroom, and what kind of role do the materials play in that classroom. So all those kinds of things, which are kind of big picture. And even do my learners need to learn what I'm teaching them now, or what's the thing behind what I'm teaching them now? Is this something they're going to be able to use? Is it helping them develop, or is this something that is imposed on them by others? So there's kind of bigger questions about that you can reflect on as well. You're right. I think a lot of the time we do get stuck on the kind of nitty-gritty of the everyday teaching, and then kind of forget about our role outside of that. Especially in ELT, because sometimes our students are not just learning English from us; they may be learning about behavioural norms and about society and about expectations and all these other kind of social lessons they may be learning from us. So if we don't also consider them, maybe also we're not doing a great job of our role too.
True. Okay, so you told us a little bit about your role here, and you're working so predominantly with students who are currently on like a Bachelor of Education or a postgraduate diploma in education.
That's right.
So you obviously spend a lot of your time with sort of maybe future teachers with no experience, or perhaps with a little bit of experience. So with sort of that in mind, what do you sort of do to advise and encourage more and more reflective practice?
Right. Well, it's something you came to earlier, the observation thing, which we didn't kind of go forward with. But so often my students, they get kind of fixated with day-to-day kind of teaching and just getting through that lesson and getting the thing done. So often that's their main thing, and they just leave the classroom and go, "Thank goodness I got that lesson done." And it wasn't, the students didn't start throwing things. Wonderful. So they often struggle with thinking about reflecting. And when they do reflect, they tend to be quite critical of themselves. So whenever we have a post-lesson observation discussion, they will start to just say, "Oh, this didn't go well, this didn't go this well, this didn't go well, this didn't go well." So I always try to get to kind of think about what went well first, to try and give them that kind of, it's partly to do with motivation, but also to show them that there's areas that there's good things that they can improve on too, and they have strengths in that lesson. And then I try to do it in a very much questioning approach, to get them to kind of problematize and question through what they did and why they did it, and try and get them to think of justifications for what they did, and then give them direction for future teaching. Because at the end of the day, there's no point reflecting unless it leads to action. So if they don't actually reflect, if they only reflect on it and think, I could have done this better, I could have done that better, but they don't think about what they're going to move forward with that, or how that's going to impact on their next lesson or the next thing they teach, then it's not purposeful reflection in my mind. They just, so I always want to see them kind of thinking about how this is going to move forward, which can be challenging for them, because they end up often teaching they might not teach a lot during their teaching practicum, and they often don't teach the same lesson again. So sometimes they struggle to think about what they can take from one lesson and then use in another.
Okay. One way that I often hear people say is a great way to kind of reflect on your practice, and after being in the job for 6 or 7 years, I still haven't done it, although I keep telling myself that I must. It's actually just recording myself teach. Do you think that, do you agree that that's a really helpful thing? And
I think
it's so. Why is it so effective?
I think it's great. I also kind of cringe whenever I watch myself on tape again. So I actually now use some of my old videos of my teaching for like professional development purposes. So I get my students to watch them, and every time I like cringe at myself and look at why are my hands doing that?
So you'll be watching this back on repeat, obviously.
And I start to do those kinds of things. But I think every time you watch it, you actually see something else again. You think, why did I ask that question? How could I have asked that question differently? How could I have given my students more wait time? How could I have done this? How could I have done that? So you end up with lots and lots of questions about yourself. And you'll also see things in your lesson that other people saw in your lessons too, which you may not see when you're actually teaching it. So often you'll get feedback from your supervisors or your peers or from others, and you won't realize why they're giving you that feedback until you actually see it yourself. And you're like, but some of those things that they can be things that are very hard to work on. Like for myself, I always feel that I struggle, like a lot of teachers do, with giving enough wait time and not answering my own questions. And no matter how many times I've watched myself teach, I always see the same issue. I still struggle to change that about myself. So even with the awareness...
Yeah, but have you seen it reduced, though? Even if, like you said, there's no perfect teacher, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen those things that improve?
I think I'm more conscious of it. So
Okay.
I tried to bring strategies that overcome that.
Yeah.
So things like... because I teach in Hong Kong, and I find sometimes the students they can be quite reluctant, even at the university level, to share their ideas. So what I do is instead of just filling the time with my own ideas, is I tend to go around and listen to them in groups and share their ideas in groups. And then if I find that the students don't self-initiate, I may initiate some students to share. Or I might say, I had a great idea, and share it anonymously. So then I end up giving someone else kind of a voice, although through myself. So those are some things I've done to try and compensate for my kind of own weaknesses there.
Okay. We've got a comment.
Okay.
What's Michael said? Problematizing helped me reflect a lot on what I was doing in the classroom, but so right to say that it doesn't mean much without the follow-up action that comes from the problem. I think that's the key, isn't it? I think that's why something I found difficult is like how to kind of log your like reflections and therefore your development, right? Because I think, like Mike says, if it's one thing to notice, but if you really want to keep track of it over sort of 5-10 years, have you ever sort of used a diary or anything like that?
I know what you mean, because I think there's the it's reflect our development as a teacher is kind of a slow process. And I don't think we notice the improvements we make so much because it's that slow process, right? So I think that sometimes we think we still have those kind of challenges or issues that we may have had from the very beginning, but maybe, like you say, we haven't noticed how much progress we've made. So actually, I myself am very poor at writing down my reflections. I do a lot of time reflecting on and thinking about what I could do differently. But we do kind of make our students to do reflections on their teaching a lot.
Yeah.
And they kind of, often in the beginning, they resent that process. They think it's extra work, it's annoying, why are you making me do this? And but then later on, actually, I think they find it's actually quite a beneficial process because they actually get to see that change in themselves. And spending that time to write actually helps you to think it through.
Yeah.
But yeah, I must admit I don't do it, but I think I should.
Yeah.
I'll give you a good example of this reflection to action thing. I took 10 undergraduate students to Ningbo in China in January, and different from their Hong Kong experience of teaching, they got to teach the same lesson to multiple classes of the same grade. So it was exactly the same objectives.
Yep.
So they taught it once and then got feedback from myself. They had a time for their own self-reflection. They also got feedback from peers who encouraged peer observations of those lessons.
Yeah.
And then they were able to revise that lesson and teach it again.
Okay.
And this I found highly effective for reflecting, because rather than the abstract of reflecting and trying to do something in a follow-up lesson that's not the same.
Yeah, where you're teaching a completely different grammar point or something.
Or the next lesson on in a sequence of lessons or something like this. They were able to teach exactly the same lesson but to a different group of learners. So they were able to instantly see how those kind of those things they reflect on the first lesson and try to improve for the second one bear fruit. Bore fruit. And when I read their reflections, because we asked them to do ongoing reflections during their experience, they all mentioned that was a really beneficial thing.
Right.
So to teach that same class again really helped them to kind of see how those things fit together.
Yeah.
So I think when we're looking at professional development and finding ways to help our teachers to do that, it's a hard thing to do, but if we can find ways for them to actually teach again the same class, that can be a really good way to do that.
Yeah, I can see how that would be especially effective.
Yeah.
So my next question is one that's sort of quite relevant to me, but I think probably to a lot of teachers, especially but not only teachers that work with young learners. If it's great to sort of get suggestions and feedback from your learners, right? And how you can then think about your approach and are they enjoying your class, how beneficial they feel it is. But obviously a lot of us work with learners whose level of proficiency is very low. You can't just have a casual chit chat about that for 10 minutes after the lesson. Have you got any suggestions for ways to get feedback from those learners?
Yeah, well, I think young learners, they tell you by their face expressions anyway.
not learn to hide it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the one thing about young learners is their honesty. They will show you if they're bored. Yeah. They will show you if they don't understand something. They will show you if they find something engaging and interesting. They will show you if they find something challenging. Like if you set them a task and say, look, I want you to make this poster for this thing. If the poster looks like they just made it in 15 seconds, they didn't enjoy the task. But it was colourful and lots of language and it's rich. It shows they do. So I think first thing to start with is to look at how they're responding to the task in the lesson itself. So that kind of reflecting in action. And then looking at their work and the kind of quality of the work they're producing. I think that can help us to see how engaged they are in the class as well and how engaged they are in our lessons. Because if they spend extra effort to do something good, that means they do value what we've asked them to do. And then I think getting them to reflect in their own language is also one approach. Although those of us who don't speak the language that they may speak, it's challenging for them, but for them to kind of at least write it down. How they felt the lesson went. And if you need someone else to support you to kind of translate that, that can be a way to do it as well. Because I think, sometimes the language can be a barrier to them reflecting on their own learning and giving us feedback. So we might just get very superficial feedback, like it was good, I like it very much, when actually they might be able to give us much richer things in the L1, and maybe we're not their focus is not necessarily language there, but to get feedback on their learning and our teaching. So I was thinking about that quite a lot, and I've become more and more comfortable now with the use of L1 for certain things that L1 kind of suits and is beneficial for.
There's a time and a place, isn't there? Yeah. I think your comment there about how you can get just from the way in which they react to a task and the way that they do a task. It's kind of made me think about the video recording thing again, because of course, you'd think, okay, the camera's on me so that I can watch back my own teaching. But actually, if you flipped it around and just put a camera so you can see really clearly see every student in the room, it might also be quite interesting to see, when I said that, look at the way, those faces kind of dropped or something.
We always ask our students to do that. We ask them to provide evidence, and one of them is to actually get the students' kind of reactions to things as well. And that video on them can really help with that. When I was in China again, they have this demonstration classroom, and they have cameras virtually everywhere. So you have a camera on you when you're teaching, a camera on the students, a camera from the other side as well. So when you get all that data back, it's highly useful to see how they're responding to things. And you may notice, I think one of the challenging things for us is when you have big classes, you tend to notice how 90% of the class is responding to you.
Yeah.
There's always that 10% that gets missed. And then you don't notice until you get their work. Or you don't notice until they take the exam or the test at the end of the semester. And you go,
which stage it's too late.
So I think you're right. If you can get feedback from them, or you can get their responses in the classroom through videoing, that can be a really good way to make sure everybody's getting our attention. We're reflecting on every learner, not just the majority of learners. Okay,
great
idea.
So I guess you've got obviously your reflections coming from yourself, but getting feedback from your learners is another way. And then what about sort of peers? How do you think? What do you think are some good ways to get your peers to help become part of this?
Well, I think peers obviously your best resource, right? Because they're always there. But it's about creating a comfortable and positive kind of culture in the school, like a kind of an open classroom kind of culture, I think. And I think a lot of us don't have those. I worked in one school that observations were very scary and were very hierarchical and top down, and everything was for appraisal purposes. And even if the principal said, "Oh no, I'm just going to come and observe you just to see what's going on," it always led to almost seemed like summative feedback in that lesson. And the teacher just had to kowtow and nod and say, "Yes, this is right. You're right. You're right." And I watched another school that had implemented lesson study approach. Where they would collaboratively plan a lesson together and then teach it to the individual classes, and then they'd observe each other, and then as a team they would look at ways to improve it, and then another teacher would teach that same lesson, a bit like it did in China, but different teachers teaching the same thing. So they all had collaborative ownership over the plan, and they all observed each other to try and improve the way that lesson was implemented. And they were then going back, and the aim was to then reflect on how it can be done better or differently with the next group of learners. And I found the culture in that school, when the principal wasn't there, when the peers were doing it themselves, was highly positive and highly collegial. But I haven't seen many schools do this kind of approach. I think it's to do with the amount of time that they have and things. And I think to do this well, you have to have that trust and honesty, and feeling that this is mutually beneficial to all. Because observing lessons is also beneficial, right? We can learn a lot from observing others. And then how we give that feedback is also important, and that's really challenging for a lot of people. So often the feedback is when you watch a peer, you tend to say, "Well, that was a good lesson. Good job." Because you don't want to offend, you don't want to upset them.
But it's frankly, it's completely useless feedback, isn't it?
Right? So I think teaching teachers how to give feedback is a very useful kind of a thing to do as well. It's not as easy as we think to give feedback, and not to offend, and to make sure that it's done in a way that is developmental and So I was thinking about this as well, and I did a workshop for a primary school on ways to give feedback, and I think the first thing to do is to try and do it in a questioning way. So why did you do that? Why did you ask that question? Why did you do that at that moment? So rather than kind of giving suggestions, you're kind of exploring reasons for that teacher's actions. So they think more about what they do.
I guess they're also getting a chance to kind of, if it was a part of the lesson that was a bit weaker, they're kind of getting a chance to sort of justify at least their thought process before someone jumps in to criticise it, which seems fair, doesn't it, really?
And the other thing to do is to tell them something that you will take and use yourself. Or I really like the fact that you did this in your classroom. I'm going to try and do that in my classroom. And that can be also a very positive way to give feedback.
Yeah.
So you can start off with those kinds of things, like steal an idea from them, and then start to think, problematize and question that kind of the other things they might have done. Yeah.
I think the time in my teaching where I actually improved the most over a fairly short period was when I was teaching the least but observing quite a lot of classes and giving a little bit of feedback. And like you say, just start like pinching ideas from people, or like, that's what I do, but just a slightly different approach on it, and all of a sudden feel like that was 20% better just by changing that one little thing.
Yeah, because often it's very small changes to a lesson that can make a huge difference to how successful that lesson is.
Yeah.
Just reworking the wording you use to introduce a task. Okay, now you're going to do a worksheet. Okay, now you're going to help me solve this problem.
Yeah.
The task could be the same. It's just how the teacher perceives it and how the students perceive it.
Yeah.
And those are the small things you notice from observing others. Like, I know if I'd done that, I would have said, now let's do this worksheet. There would have been a heart sunk feeling. Things like one of my research interests is homework, and the more and more I research, I noticed that 95% of teachers set homework at the end of the lesson. And it kind of somewhat deflates the class. Okay, we just had a really fun lesson. You've done this, this, and this. Okay, your homework. Do page 7 of the workbook.
Yeah.
And then you just hear this massive sigh, and then the teacher leaves, and another teacher comes in. And one of the things I've been reading is set homework at the beginning, so the students know where this is going.
Yeah.
And that's going to be one of the things they're expected to do.
And
it changes. Those kinds of small changes can have a big impact on how the lesson goes. But that's something I got from kind of observing others and researching a bit more. I saw the practice. I saw the students didn't respond how they had done before to kind of homework kind of routine.
Yeah.
I looked it up a bit more and found out actually that's a good practice to do, and then implemented some of the things myself. Then I found that worked. So
yeah, that is such an easy change to make, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, they're not all sort of. You don't need to become so much better in order to do these things. It's just like, oh, really? I just switched that around and great.
Yeah.
The effect is positive, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll be wrapping up now. I've got one more question for you before we go. This is a question that was actually put to Jenny Bartlett and Chris Farrell on our e-bulletin last month. So it is, what is the one thing that you wish you'd known as a new teacher? And why would it have been useful to know it?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. There's a lot of things I wish I knew when I first became a teacher. Yeah, these wonderful podcasts are available, webinaries or Facebook Lives are available. That would have been useful to know. But I think the biggest thing and the biggest strategy, I think, and I was asked this question by the Amy Teasel students here a few weeks ago. What would be the one thing that you would is the most effective pedagogical tool in the classroom? That was the question they asked me, and I think it's the same answer I would give. It would be the power of think, pair, share. Because I think the number of benefits of think, pair, share are huge. One is it gives the students time to prepare their ideas, and when you're teaching a second or foreign language, students need time to articulate what they want to say. So it gives them the time to do that. It gives them time to check their ideas against somebody else and get that reassurance that someone else has the same idea as them, or helps them formulate ideas with somebody else. So it gives them that confidence that they've shared it already before they have to share it with their class. The teacher has time to kind of see if the students are thinking or not about that idea. So it gives the teacher some thinking time. The teacher doesn't end up answering their own question, just like I used to do. So I think it helps with that as well. So I think for me, like, if there was one pedagogical strategy or one thing I wish I knew when I started teaching, it would be that I don't have to be talking the entire lesson. I can give time for the students to kind of think. I can give them time and trust them to share with others.
Yeah.
And then give them time to share with the class. And it increases that engagement, increases the chance they have something to share. And even if they don't get to share it with the whole class, at least they shared it with somebody. So everybody gets the chance to talk. And I think that's something that's an integral part of what we do.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Ben. Much appreciated. And that is us over and out. So thank you for joining us, guys. I'll be back again in a couple of months. So it'll be sometime in March with someone else I'll have managed to catch hold of for long enough for a Facebook Live chat. Okay, so all right. Okay, thanks a lot. See ya. Bye.
Bye.